Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, in our ongoing study of the meaning of God and human experience by W.E. Hocking. We're going to take a look at the final lesson in worship of God before we transition into the fruit bearing of discipleship. We're going to take a look at the final lesson in worship of God. That'll be chapters 26 and 27. Pages 369 to 405. It'll wrap up the teaching on worship of God. We're going to look at the nature of worship. We're going to look at a new moment that he adds to phenomenology between the intellect and the realm of positing. And we'll take a look at the concrete benefits of that additional moment that he adds to phenomenology. Let's begin with block one. Let's take a look at the nature of worship. Hocking tells us that worship evokes a special faculty of the mind. Worship and thought are diverse from each other. It is the faculty of the nameless soul, or the spark of the soul, or the subconscious. It is that fundamental motivational base to humanity, that state of mind. Under the subconscious, it represents the self as reaching a voluntary passivity. We address the physical basis for worship. The body is held in leash during the flight of the soul through purgation or self-denial or the power of renunciation. And so we have this moment that he calls the power of renunciation in note 3. We abandon the sensations, we seek union with God, which is preceded by enlightenment. The three stages are that purgation, enlightenment, and union. We suppress the intellect momentarily. We bracket the intellect, we bracket reason momentarily, because radical annihilation must give way, says Christianity. So, Christianity will negate radical annihilation in note 4 because the love of God remains our centeredness. But the active part of lordship remains negation, says Hocking. Worship must transition to its positive side. And that is the turn of meditation, when the self reminds itself of the absolute good in meditation. Let's take a look at note 5. And that meditation on the absolute good. Prayer is a process of self-remembering, says Hocking. We recall the deepest principles of the will, of that sorting out of preferences, of determining that which is of value. We negate that which is mere illusion, that is our enemy. We focus on the object that abbreviates all values, that guiding overarching value, that guiding foundational value, which for Christianity is Christ himself. And that's why we take a look at note 6, meditating on the guiding value. This brings forward the quality of conviction, especially if this guide is a person like Christ for Christianity, but it still remains preliminary because we have this momentary bracketing of reason as we turn inward in this moment of meditative yielding of the self to God. It's a meditative yielding of the self to God, absolute yielding of the self to God, after we leave intellect and before we enter the realm of positing. It's this stage of what Hocking calls special cultivation. So let's take a look at note 7. One must accomplish a pure heart through self-knowledge, leading to a summary repudiation of pride. So we humble ourselves in this stage prior to the realm of positing. And this closes the stages of preparation, says Hocking, because next is the realm of positing. We have reached that attainment of a voluntary passivity in humility. So this becomes critical. In Block 2, we're going to take a look at this additional stage added to phenomenology by Hocking, the moment between intellect and positing. We leave intellect and we bracket reason temporarily as we enter into the realm of positing, and it is that moment of worship. It's that moment of prayerful, meditative submission to God. And in Block 2, Note 1, Hocking calls this the single thrust of mental energy. The self next enters the stage of special cultivation. There you go. He calls it special cultivation. The mind is in a state of powerful directed attention toward God, entering the single thrust of mental energy and heightened self-consciousness exclusively related to the Absolute, to God through Christ. And so this Note 2, exclusive relation to the Absolute, we are open to God speaking to the soul. We are open to revelatory moment. That's key. We're open to transcendence and revelatory moment. We acquire an exalted revelatory wisdom. We attain an attitude of effectual, true agape, self-giving love. And we apprehend this by positing our faith. It's a faith-type moment. And Hocking calls it a temporary divine suspension of action in the positing. So before we reach actual positing, the Spirit of God, the living Spirit, temporarily suspends action for this revelatory moment of communion in meditation and prayer, in worship. In other words, before we go out in a ministry, we have preparation in a worshipful, meditative, prayerful moment, called that special cultivation. So Block 2, Note 3, divine suspension of act. Self engages in a quiet search for signs, for thanks of grace. An obligation is felt to shape acts of faith and love in pure union within reality. The act of the real emerges and is recognized by the self. Self-interest is negated in humility, and we reach that passivity of dependence on God. Ministry is going to be launched by first an absolute dependence on God before we reach that realm of positing. The passivity of dependence. So the act of the real emerges in Note 4, Block 2, Note 4. Now God lifts the soul to himself. A moral character is adopted by the self to shape our conviction. This stage prior to positing represents the finding of God in absolute heightened self-consciousness. Now of necessity, we're ready to transition to the realm of positing. We are deeply aware of the obligation to posit the meaning of the real, the meaning of the idea. And that leads us to Block 2, Note 5, the final note in Block 2, leaving special cultivation stage to the realm of positing. The self is now knocking on the door of things, but no longer an outsider. The self has been admitted to the council of world makers, because the self has reached understanding of the heart of the world, which is spirit, and is fully at home in the world of spirit, the world of the real. So the nature of worship, which is that birth of that mediating moment in phenomenology between the intellect and the realm of positing. It is an actual preparatory, meditative, prayerful yielding to God, and it's called the moment of special cultivation in Block 2. And then by working through that area of the passivity of dependence on God for all that we do in ministry, we're ready to reach that stage of concrete actuality, leaving the stage of special cultivation. That's going to be our Block 3. Let's take a look at Block 3. We'll take a look at the concrete benefits of the stage of special cultivation. And we begin with Note 1, the objective organic wave of experience. Meditation has ties to common experience. Self-consciousness of the worldly self remains. The self is still influenced by the law of rhythm, by the organic wave of experience, but now experience begins to be interpreted by the self. So we move into that subjective interpretation of experience in Note 2. Within the moment of special cultivation, this interpretation emerges. Self initiates the turn toward the world as a turn within the self's rhythm of alteration, from meditation to the turn toward the world. The habit of worship reinforces this rhythm, but the act of consent does emerge out of meditation and worship, a consent to enter into ministry in absolute dependence on God and God's Spirit. So, Hocking's conclusion, Note 3.3.3, objective organic wave and subjective interpretation equal the act of consent in turning toward practical world. The practical turn, we're ready to enter into the realm of positing. The special cultivation still remains in possession of the self. The self takes up an exclusive attention toward the real, toward kingdom. This becomes a practical narrowing of vision. The self attains a new psychical level. Special cultivation has maintained the self's spiritual integrity prior to mission. Spiritual integrity is heightened and maintained prior to mission. So Note 4, this is a moment of mystery. It's whenever two modes of experience are not in perfect communication, but it includes the voluntary effort to make communication between the two worlds of the real and the sensate. And this becomes the moment of the emerging incipient idea, where we narrow the realm of ideas to the practical signs. Not wholly seized yet in this moment of special cultivation, but soon to be taken up as we re-engage rational thought and enter the realm of positing. So Note 5, Block 3, Note 5, incipient idea, the self possesses a surety of creation. The understanding of the union between the sensate and the real progresses. Rationality temporarily suspends itself in this realm of special cultivation and then unbrackets itself to move into the realm of positing. Empirical truth emerges, the practical concern emerges. The self is committed to the unknown absolute and seeks to imprint the sensate with the reality of the unknown absolute. The rhythm of meditative experience therefore has laws and concrete benefits, says Hocking. That's his conclusion to worship. The rhythm of meditative worshipful experience does have laws, and it does have concrete benefits in preparing us for the realm of positing and true ministry, where we go out of ourselves and work toward kingdom and imprinting the sensate with the realm of the real, the realm of the kingdom. So his final lesson in worship, chapters 26 and 27, take us through the nature of worship and the birth of a brand new moment in phenomenology that lingers between the intellect and the will and the realm of positing. It's worshipful preparation for the realm of positing. It's special cultivation in worship and meditation and prayer. It prepares us, so it's the special cultivation stage. It's a new moment added to phenomenology. If you go back to our composite, you'll see that it gets placed right between intellect and realm of positing. It gets added right there. But it has concrete benefits. Worship has very concrete benefits. Meditation has concrete benefits. Prayer has concrete benefits. And it leads to preparing us for that birth of idea, because we are encountering revelatory content. We're open to revelatory content in meditation. Things get open to us. Revelatory truth gets opened to us and prepares us for ministry. Very much needed revelatory truth becomes unveiled in meditation and prayer prior to ministry, and it equips us in a way that only the Spirit can equip us. Tremendous teaching from W.E. Hocking. That's going to wrap up chapters 26 and 27, pages 369 to 405. We'll pick up next time in chapter 28, and we'll be looking at carporphoria, or fruition, fruit bearing.